Let's see. So last time I was here was probably in 1986, something like that, at your conference. So it's been a while, and I'm glad to be back. I think last time it was in Imperial College. So this time also a nice location. Yeah, my name is Steen Petersen. I was one of the 3 people behind the HEPAX module back in the days. You can say, just out of, yes, we did make a nice brochure just to see what it is we are doing about. This is the one in Danish. We also did one in English. I don't have that anymore. But this is what we did. And basically, I put down things in the Recall 40. So please have a look. And this is trying to be a summary of that. Basically, we made this product back in the 80s. We went broke. I got another job. I didn't touch a calculator for 30 odd years. And last year in May, just for fun, I don't know what went into it, I Googled HEPAX. And I found hpcalc.org, and I found all kinds of VM electronics, what has happened, kind of what was happening, and I found, Angel Martin had reverse engineered some of the code that I did back in the days, and he was really impressed with what was there. It's kind of, okay, maybe it was not too bad what we did back in those days, but well, I went to the attic and found my treasure chest of stuff. I took some pictures. This also on HP Museum. And I found the old breadboard we were using. I found all kinds of funny stuff. Not that much, though. I did find one HEPAX module that did not work, but the breadboard worked. So I back and forth, and then Lodek and Mark sent me a mail here tail end of last year asking if I wanted to contribute to this, and I thought, well, it's kind of, we thought, the 3 of us thought this was long gone and forgotten and probably worth kind of writing something about it, and so it's archived properly, and I appreciate what Jacob's done with his archive. I got hold of the archive and I found references in my article, reference to articles I wrote for Datafile or for, there's the Corvallis conference in '88. I did a presentation there. So there's materials out there, and I found some links. So that's very, very good. And in case you didn't know, HEPAX was short for Hewlett-Packard 41 expansion. So early days, very early days. I met Sten Vesterli and Flemming Madsen at a PPC Denmark embassy meeting. I actually managed to find the exact date when we met, which was kind of funny. And we were young back in those days. Sten and Flemming had worked on a ROM box for the 41, and they had a prototype, really early prototype at that meeting, and then they were missing someone to do some software. Well, how hard can it be? But basically we kind of got engaged in that, and we showed to be very enthusiastic about the HP41 and what we're doing. So basically it was a bookstore in Denmark that ran PPC Denmark at that point in time. They said, don't you want to take over the club? Right? Because you look like you're some young guys who wants to do stuff. So we did. So Flemming became chairman, I think. I became treasurer because I was the first one to turn 18. None of us was 18 at that point in time. Just to put that into perspective. We spent the years while we were doing this, we ran the Danish club, and we also had the international conference in '87 where Lodek did a presentation, and there's also a summary from that in one of the old data files. But that was good fun. So what did it all start with? This is actually kind of what we started with, and the picture. So the picture is of the latest breadboard. The early version had ribbon cables between them. It was the same boards. It was in, if you note some of the index cards, so the black box for index cards, it fit perfectly into one of those with some cloth in between, so it had to be folded out. So it's really, really unstable. And then kind of several times he had to fix broken connections, and that's why eventually he bolted them together so it was one long solid board that didn't really break. And also, as I said, when I picked it out of the attic 30 odd years later, it still worked. So Steen, he worked on the hardware. I looked at some, okay, what do you need in a ROM box like that? And it was, again, we looked at what was done in Australia and other places, and I started to look at some of the, I can't really remember the details on that. But the idea was to do some RAM and ROM boxes. So it was a, the board was kind of, we wanted to make a box that was about this size, kind of this thickness, and we bought a cable from HP, similar to the one with the old printer, so just a cable with a connector on it, and we put that into the box. We had some friends design the PCB board inside. We got a kind of connections to a Danish company that could actually manufacture them, and the idea was there was one ROM connection box at the bottom, and then you have connector on the top, and you can stack another module of 8K of RAM on top and another one 8K RAM on top of it. And we did make the first prototype, and it was kind of a stack like this. It's kind of a cable into the 41, and it's kind of, okay. We showed that to a couple of friends in the club, and it was kind of, yeah, impressive, kind of. But then we got material from, I think, hpcalc. We saw some of the things that was coming out from Aramco, I think was the one we saw. It's kind of, that's on the market now, and we're working on a stack of lunch boxes. But do we think this at all is a viable business idea? And we kind of, nah, it's not. That was kind of our conclusion. So then what? Right. So we thought long and hard and said if we had to make a different product that really meant something, it had to be smaller than the card reader. It basically had to be the size of a module. That was the only way it could be viable, kind of, and successful from a business point of view. We also had to we thought about making money. So we said it has to be something like this, else it would not sell. So especially Steen, he took a module apart from kind of normal plug-in module, and he measured it, everything to 1/10 of a millimeter to find out how much space do we actually have. And then we looked at what component do we need in order to make this work. So we needed a RAM chip, we needed a chip with an EEPROM, and we needed a gate array. Because that was all this logic that you saw on the breadboard has to fit into one chip. And then it was looking at the measurements, we selected the components based on how much room do we have. And it was down to the 1/10 of a millimeter, how much room we had. And if you notice, I think, do you have a module with you today?
I'll bring it here later.
Yes, good, because the different kind of physical layout of it is you don't have a handle as you have a normal plug-in module, but you have a way to a fingernail on the corner, and then you can pull it out. We had to do that because we did not have enough space inside to fit this. So we had to have, with the free components, we also had to see, okay, how do we put them together? And it was a ceramic substrate, 3 layers, we had to use in order to make all the connections that were necessary. And it was, back in those days, in 86, 87, there was, I think, one company in Denmark that knew how to do stuff like that. So we got hold of them, and even though, you free blokes, I'm really not sure we want to talk to you guys because it's really advanced stuff. But we managed to get some connections and some recommendations, and yes, they help us doing that. So we kind of, and this is what we said back to the drawing board. Gate array design, that's not cheap. It's also one of the things we found out. Yes, we can get an EEPROM and a RAM module, but gate array, it requires a significant upfront investment in paying someone to say, you want to do the design, and then there's also a minimum order size on gate arrays. We had to buy 300 units at a time. And we were all 3 students, right? And very young, maybe a little naive. We had Fleming, he went around all kinds of Danish banks and asked, can we loan some money? Okay, so what do you have? It's gonna, that idea is gonna, goodbye. Right. At the end, we found one bank that had investing in startups. It was really, nothing was called startups back in 86. But they were doing stuff like that and said, yes, we'll do that. And of course, we had to sign, we had a personal guarantee for all the loans. Of course, they're saying they would risk money and all that stuff. Yeah, you still have to sign. That's kind of how it was. So, I already mentioned many of these things. The connectors, because there's also the connectors going into the actual calculator, which Dr. mentioned about the 75 earlier. We tried to get someone in Denmark to make the connectors going into a 41. And they were doing in the end they were saying, nah, we cannot do this. It's simply it'll either ruin the calculator or it'll not have a good connection. So we managed to convince HP to sell us the bare connectors, not connected to anything but the bare. So we got them in in trays with lots of bare gold-plated connectors. And we had a local plastic expert that had made the mold and made sure that they could be fit in there. And so that was also the company that did the actual assembly of the module for us. But that was okay, is this at all possible? When we started this process, we didn't know. Yes, we knew we had to do some things, but a lot of things we didn't know. So basically, we went in saying, wow, how hard can it be? It was quite hard. Just want to see. So one of the things when I wrote for Recall 40, I was not aware that pictures were possible to put in. It was no saying maybe not, and I decided not to put any pictures in there. But so you really have to look at the presentation and blow up and look at these pictures, because there's some interesting stuff in here. So the breadboard here actually there's also some dip switches, and there's some instructions on what do these dip switches do. And of course, you have a fixed module that's come on, there's no switches on those, right? Well, you see, we need to have a possibility to have a advanced HEPAX module, 16K RAM and an EEPROM. We also had to have an 8K module. We had a memory module only with 8K, memory module 16K only. We also thought about making a ROM only module. We never did that, but how do you do that on yes, then we needed different ceramic substrate. That's very, very expensive. So we found a way saying we have one substrate, and then the manufacturer, he had a laser cutter. So there's actually some wires that could be cut. But of course, we didn't want being new enthusiast. What do? They take things apart. I bought an 8K module. If I cut here, I can get a 16K module. Yes. So we put some good epoxy on top, so no one could find out, except Diego Diaz. He actually found out. So, but that was a few years later. So no harm done to our business on that front. But it was actually a programmable ceramic substrate. It was programmable when we did the manufacturing. The software, that was quite a piece. We thought, okay, it's going to be, now it's a module, it fits inside the calculator, but what should it do, right? Apart from work when it's plugged in, it also had the we like the extended functions. All those functions that you could store programs, store data, and all that. But in order to run the programs, you had to pull them out again. So, okay, couldn't we store the programs and run them just like another ROM module? So, but of course, not all our customers would be enthusiasts like you. Some would just want to store a program and just have it runnable. So, very important piece of this was it has to be extremely easy to use. And of course, when you plug in a module, how do you know where things are? There's all the not mechanics, but what's the housekeeping? What are the things that needs to be done in order for that to work? And of course, it only fits in one port. We found out pretty quickly that 8K of ROM was not sufficient, and we 16K is probably the right thing. So there was the advantage module, I think, had 2 banks at that point in time. So we thought we need more than 2 banks. So we invented a couple of opcodes and had 4 banks. But then again, when you plug in the module, it's there's the ROM, and then there's the RAM that sits there, and the RAM is that occupies the port where you sit. So what do you do about the ROM? You don't know what other modules are in the machine. If you have an HPCalc, you have a timer module, you don't know what else is there. So how can you make sure the ROM module actually can sit somewhere where there's space? So Steen and myself, we talked about that a bit, and I had a whiteboard and said, what can we do? And it was hardware-wise, we found that when the moment you plug in the module and you power on the machine, the ROM overlaps the first bank of RAM. Because we knew that's available because you plugged it into the port, so it doesn't matter which port you're in. You have the 8K of that port is always available. So it took over that piece, and then the software that we hadn't written yet had to find a way how to move that to somewhere else. We also invented an instruction that moved the ROM module to another bank. How do you do that? And I think Angel Martin reverse engineered that part, how to do that. It did take some time to figure out something that actually was workable. And of course, that's where the breadboard is used for. I had the breadboard to use in my software development to find out how do I actually make this work. The interesting piece also is that all the RAM, we said, okay, for protection, we would better also make it write protected. So we had another function that made the RAM write protected. But of course, this sequence of moving the ROM to somewhere else need us to put a small piece of code somewhere in RAM. So that tells you have to execute the function that moves the hardware module, and then return the instruction to where the ROM module is now moved to. And I think it's no more than a handful of instructions, but of course that has to be somewhere. So we had some space in the RAM modules where that could be called from. Yes, of course the piece, it has to be easy to use, it has to have all the functionality of data storage, programs and so on. We also were a bit enthusiastic, so of course there also had to be some functions for us. So yes, one of the first tools I had to use, I got the ASM3 assembler from Australia. That was the one I used to all programming. I made my own disassembler because I really needed that to be working perfectly, else I wouldn't know what I was doing. Also had a hex editor that I think CenROM also had a hex editor, but I needed a few more things. I had 4 banks, I had other things, and I needed that. So that's some tools I made in order to make that possible. How did I write the code? I was a poor student. I had an HP 41. I had a tape drive, and I had a printer. That's basically what I had. So all the code I wrote, I took blank piece of paper. I took my pen and I wrote, okay, what is it I want to do? And I wrote the code on a piece of paper. And when I was kind of happy on, okay, what does this do? I had the ASM or the VASM listings from HP, and kind of if I had to have some calls I need to do. I also had a couple of books from various people that could help which subroutines to use for certain things. But basically everything was written on a blank piece of paper. I entered it into the 41 using the 41 keyboard, using the SM3 assembler, and then I basically debugged it on the machine itself. So how do you debug? You put in a kind of calls to print instruction. You basically make edits to the code to see how far it goes, and are you still happy with the result it is? And then in the end, okay, now it looks good. Okay, the piece of paper kind of over in the stack and never to be looked at again. And then I printed out disassembled the code I've made, kind of put a little roll and put into my little box of printer rolls, where kind of when you use the printer rolls, you still have the box. It was rolled into. I had several pieces of, or actually not several. I had all my code printed out on the printer. I made some notes about where did the program start, where did it end, so I had an idea of where it was. Also found out I better had a backup, so I did the write ROM, read ROM instructions or programs to store them on disk, supporting 4 banks. I had to make those, and in all the time I only had one function I had to fully comment, because some of them were fairly advanced, and I put it on paper, but over in the stack, and I didn't look at it again. But there's one function that we could resize files in the file system, and if you have several banks of RAM, that means kind of if a file is shrunk in size, it means all the data has to be moved across all the module boundaries. And there was a defect in the 1C module, I think. And that was the reason we did a 1D. So, and I at that point in time, not me, but HPCC Denmark had an HP 150 computer sitting in my study, because I was the treasurer, I was the one using that for keeping membership track. So I used that, entered all the code in there in I think it was Word or something, what was available at that point in time. And I commented, making sure, what does all this do, and do I have everything fully understood? So that's the only function that was fully documented. Unfortunately, the disk with that in is gone. So unfortunately, it would have been fun to have that one in it. We made it to work, and yeah. So market reception. Well, we got some very positive feedback, and got some people buying it as well, including people from this club. We needed cash, so one of the things we did was we did a pre-ordering campaign. We had good connections with all the various user groups. There's also one of the reasons we kept the HPCC Denmark alive was also to make sure we had relationship with our customer base. At the conference in Copenhagen, there was 14 clubs represented. So, of course, that's 14 clubs we can send out here. Here's an offer for a discount, I think 20% discount if you order before a certain date. So that gave us some cash, which was good. And people were fairly happy with the product. There was a couple of things they were not too happy about. But we did sell, I think, 180, 200 modules. I talked to Stan and Fleming here a couple of months ago, and they believed that was about the order of magnitude we came to. We had this bug in 1C, and everyone that had an issue with that, we had to replace the module free of charge. Unfortunately, we were not able to reprogram the module. That was one of the kind of design ideas that you'll be able to reprogram the EEPROM. Unfortunately, something didn't work out and that was not possible. So, darn, we have to replace it. We did manage to recoup some of the components, but when you have epoxy on top of them, it's kind of difficult. Also, the production yield, ceramic substrate, and there was 3 different technologies on the 3 chips we were using. So basically, it was, and there was a reason no one else used that, because it did give you a really poor yield. So I think I talked to Steen and he said about 70% yield. And of course, if you want to have a business out of that, 70% yield doesn't cut it right. It simply does not. And also one thing that you may have noticed if you have a module is if you put it on something else than port number 1, it drained the battery like quite fast. So it was ideal, port number 1. Port number 2 and 3 was about the same, more drain, but port number 4 was really high drain. It was kind of how the binary, there's 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, and 1, 1. So.
Is that the hardware thing?
Yes.
Right.
It's a hardware thing.
Not the software?
No. It is purely you put it in and you can basically, on my HP41, you can hear the drain of the battery.
You can hear it?
I can hear it. Yeah.
You mean in the circuitry that?
Yeah. So there's some like it's kind of, kind of, but very low. Right?
Is that only in power on mode, or does it drain the battery even when covering it off?
Always.
Yeah.
And that was.
I think mine else.
But you have. I think yours was in port 1, so that was okay.
Yes.
But still.
I just had a question. I didn't understand how you have code
Yes.
that's in the module.
Yes.
The code is also telling the calculator how to talk to the module. So how do you bootstrap it so that
So the bootstrap is that there's an interrupt that kind of goes out and starts. It looks at all the modules, and there's one that's an auto run piece in all banks, and it auto runs on the code in the HEPAX module as well. And that's where the code that I wrote then gets executed. So that's a standard thing. That's what the auto start module or some other things that does that.
Okay, I guess like even PCIe ports do that too. They have some little piece of code and they wake up that.
Yeah. So how did this all end? Right. So when we finally got a module to market in 1988, HP41 was already an old product. And there's lots of other handheld devices placed on the market. We also had portable computers coming out. And we try to get kind of, today you have the internet. And how do you sell things? You create a web shop, you send out messages, and then people start buying things. And in those days it was difficult, different. Steen and Fleming, they went a tour to the US because then we knew if we could get into the US market, we could make some good money on this. They visited the 7 biggest dealers, distributors in the US, and only HpCalc kind of picked up on this, and they were our biggest customer overall. I think somewhere on HP Museum that we actually sent a prototype to Richard Nelson to play with. And that was what they found, and I think Diego Diaz, he managed to get it operational again. So it's kind of funny. But hitting the bigger market was difficult. We did get some Danish dealers. We were Danish, so we had some good relationship there. They bought some as well. I found a Danish translation of the 41 user manual. It was printed in 5,000 copies, and there was a second edition for another 5,000 copies, which didn't sell out. But that means even just in Denmark, there was more than 5,000 HP41 calculators on the market. But it was old. And that was really you can say, time to market matters a lot. We always hear about that in startups, kind of the sooner you can get to the market, the better. The question is, back in those days, could we have had it to market kind of a year earlier? Then we may have had a better chance, but still, it would not have met, I think, the numbers that we really needed. Also, I had to do my study. We had to do this at the same time. So it was a hard thing to do. The piece that really broke us was this gate array I talked about. We bought them 300 at a time. The first 300 we had used. We bought a second batch from Fujitsu, and the bill came and say, okay, or the invoice, and say, now you have to pay for these 300. And then we looked at kind of, okay, doesn't look too good on the cash thing, and bye-bye. So that was then we had no more money. We had we were students. We had no we didn't get money from anywhere other than what we've sold, and we put our own time in this. So the good thing is that the investment or this investor bank thing, that they kind of realized, well, we hadn't withdrawn any salary in all the years we worked on this. So they kind of took, okay, you only pay half of what you loan back. But still, it was, back in those days, I think it was about £20,000 I owned personally, and same for the other two. And of course, needed to do something else. So what did we learn out of all that? We managed very young, started age of 18. We got the product on the market, we were 22. So it was a incredible experience, a great learning experience, you can say. We did startup before anything was called startup. We worked really hard, and we brought an advanced product to market. Well, without making any money, but it was still an experience. I then had to get a job to make some money. I had a debt. And funnily enough, I had actually been kind of with HP. There was a summer intern program that HP had back in those days, where every year they sent one person from European countries to the US as a summer intern. I was the lucky guy in 1988. That's also why I was at the Covalis conference in '88, because I was actually employed by HP in those 3 months of the summer, and I did manage to see the early prototype on the HP42, because I had my HP small batch, so I was allowed to see that. But when I came back, and HP said, yeah, we would love to give you a job. However, we don't have any development engineering jobs in Denmark. We only have sales, marketing, stuff like that. So they decided after that year, instead of going to the technical university for these students they sent to the US, they went to the business school instead. But I was the last one from the technical university. I looked around, and it turned out Motorola at that time, also an American company, same kind of legacy, they were hiring software engineers needed for embedded code. And I showed my boss, or the hiring manager, I showed him the HEPAX module, and I said, by the way, I'm newly graduated, I have 5 years experience making a product. And he kind of looked at that and said, okay. He wanted to hire me, and there was a competition inside the company of who wanted he got the first pick, and he picked me. And I just talked to him 3 weeks ago, and I mentioned I was coming here, and he said, yes, I hired you because of the HEPAX module. So this was it was kind of fun. So I've been there for 33 years, working on embedded programming and with all kinds of stuff globally. I have 10 patents, and it's been really, really good to me. Yes, we do have a museum similar to HP. We have that in Chicago. Walkie-talkies from World War II. It was something we did. Similar type of company, and I think cultural and so on fits very well with me. So here I am. I've recorded my history, and I thank everyone for supporting us over the days. So, thank you.
Actually, I have a question, two questions. Number one, when you actually, as students, realized you had a product, how did you price that, and indeed, how much was it actually sold for the 180 to 200 of those customers? And the other thing, were you ever aware of any of those 180, 200 customers that bought this product that used it to solve a very specific, very interesting problem?
Yeah. So we looked at the pricing-wise, we were looking at what does the extension function module sell for. We looked at some of the competing products from Aramco and seeing what do they sell for, and it's kind of, if now we have a smaller, better product than Aramco, it's kind of, we priced it a little higher, and then there was an introduction discount, so it was lower. If you go into the HPCalc catalog, you can actually see there's a introduction and then a strikeout price, and then there's a lower one. So that was kind of, we never went away from that discount, I think, but anyway, it kind of indicated the value of that. Of the customers, we didn't get any specific feedback on what they were being used for. Yes, we start selling it. It was focused on we need to get it out the door, and we need to. So it was Fleming who had the contact to all our customers. Basically, my contact was relating to when we were at conferences like here. But basically, I don't think I went to any conferences after we launched the product. I don't think I went anywhere because we were busy making things go, and then I needed to finish my education. I got my Master of Science in 89. So we launched the product in 88. I got my Master's in 89, and then we were broke at that point in time. So it didn't went far from product to the market, broke.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did there a conference in Corvallis in 88?
Yes.
Yes. So we saw you there as well, yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask two questions?
Yes.
The first one, I remember someone who was making a plug-in module, and they had so much trouble that they had to make the shell thinner than the HP shells, just to squeeze that in. Was that you or was that someone else?
That was us.
That was you. Not only did you not have a handle, but you had the plastic thinner,
Yes.
but you were worried that it would be so thin that it would damage the module, but it wasn't that.
No.
Okay, the second thing is, I wrote this up in data file, you probably saw it.
Yeah.
And you had ordinary functions,
Yes.
and you had what HP had, which are titles
Yes.
for each group. So if you've got an extended functions module, you go through the catalogue, and it says these are the advanced functions, these are the maths functions, these are the I/O functions, and so on. And if you play enough with synthetic functions, you can put one of those functions in as a program call. But you can't normally do it, it doesn't do anything, but I did that with yours.
Yes.
And one of the functions there, if I put that in, it gave me an option to jump to any address in M-code.
Yes.
Why didn't you tell people about that? Did the function have a bug in it? Did you only want to keep it for yourselves? It was a wonderful function, but it wasn't manual.
So
It was hidden.
well, was that the? I don't remember that one. Yeah. So one thing I did with the conference in Corvallis, I did write all about the file system that was created and what was the different addresses exactly for you enthusiasts, and stuff you could do to make some tweaks if you needed to. So that I put into that paper. Yeah, there was a couple of nifty things here and there. I also think there's a copyright message in one of the banks. Stuff kind of, yeah.
And you say that on startup you had to run some RAM code, so you had to copy something to RAM to run it.
Yes.
Where in RAM did you put it so that?
So I probably need to look at Agent Martin's reverse engineering of the code. But it was part of the HEPAX RAM, I was writing it to, of course, and I think I had some reserved space for that. So basically there was one address that was indicating whether the module was integrated in the file system or not, and that had a fixed value always. So you can say that was a free space I could use during initialization, because when I'm done with initialization, I know I write a fixed number on that one. I had a couple of those.
So you used your own private RAM, not part of the RAM inside the 41. That's how it worked.
Yes. But that was also how do I find RAM to use?
Yes.
Also, if you note that there's a checksum at the end, and in the checksum at the end of all ROM modules from HP, it's a checksum. It kind of gives, it can be any number from 1 through, or 0 through whatever. I had a other word that I used to make the checksum 100. I think it was 100, 200, 300, 400. So I also always knew which bank were I in. I could just look at the checksum at the end. So another nifty little thing. So kind of, yeah.
It was brilliant. Okay, I'll bring one up just so people can see it.
Yes.
I brought the box so people can see what the box looks like.
Yes.
It was such a wonderful thing. I've always kept the box pristine.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.